Hey guys, I feel like it's been so long, even though we were only on spring break for 1 week. It still feels like a world away from you since it's been now 2 weeks since we've been in class together. But this week, since we're starting class back online, that means I'm starting our book up again as well. So, welcome back for Breadcrumbs chapter 4. Now, I know that it's been a bit, so as a reminder of what's happened since, Hazel, last we saw, was playing with her best friend Jack on the playground and absolutely slung a snowball at him. And she got a piece of ice stuck in his eye. Jack clutched his face and groaned. Hazel started to follow him inside, but Mrs. Jacobs, her homeroom teacher, stopped her. So she stood and watched as Mr. Williams led Jack away because there was nothing at all she could do. No further ado, time to dive into chapter 4, Pieces. In a flash, the fifth graders of Lovelace Elementary were crowded around Hazel. What happened? Did his eye fall out? Is he going to be blind? It was the first time they'd ever wanted to hear what she had to say. But for once, she had no story to tell. There are things you don't notice until they're gone. Like the certainty that your body is a single whole, that there's something that keeps you from breaking into pieces and scattering in the wind. Now Hazel could feel pieces of her threatening to break off, and she was no longer sure her feet would stay attached to the ground. Jack was hurt. She felt it as if it had happened to her. She would have preferred it that it had happened to her, because then she wouldn't be standing here, helpless with the entire fifth grade looking to her. Hazel could fight anything, dragons, wicked witches, evil baseball-playing supervillains, but she needed Jack beside her. He was supposed to be beside her. So she looked around at the other kids. The girls huddled up, whispering and pointing. The boys shuffled around and didn't look anyone in the eye, except for two of them. Bobby and Tyler were both shooting her nasty looks. Hazel met their eyes and scowled at them, and they scowled back. Mrs. Jacobs put her hand on Hazel's back and whispered, "He'll be all right." Hazel turned to look up at her teacher, trying to discern whether she meant, "I have actual knowledge that I am imparting to you about Jack's condition," or "I have no idea whether he'll be okay, but since I'm a grown-up, I think pretending I do is somehow comforting to you." Then the bell rang, and Mrs. Jacobs motioned everyone into the building. Hazel looked at the spot where Jack had been, but there was nothing there except the impression his legs left in the snow. Nobody could sit still in Mrs. Jacobs' class that afternoon, least of all Hazel. Her desk was positioned just so that she could see almost out the door. Almost. When Mrs. Jacobs wrote on the blackboard, Hazel could lean forward, trying to catch some glimpse of Jack-like movement in the hallway. This time it would be him peeking in the doorway, Hazel making some kind of face, and in that face she would say, "I'm so glad you're back, and I hope you're okay, and I'm so sorry." And he'd be able to read all of it. It was just something in his eye, she tried to tell herself. Maybe he would need an eye patch. He would like that. Jack knew the value of an eye patch. But Hazel had things stuck in her eye before, and it didn't make her want to rip her face off. And Jack never felt a thing. That's what he said whenever he hurt himself. "I never feel a thing." It was one of his powers, he said. She had never seen anything hurt anyone the way that this hurt Jack. It was just something in his eye. She couldn't get the image out of her head of the impression of his legs in the snow, and anyone else who looked wouldn't understand. They would just see two leg-sized trenches and wonder what had made them. They would think that this was an empty thing, that that's what it was supposed to be, that there's something perfectly normal about a thing that exists entirely because it's lacking something. "Hazel," snapped Mrs. Jacobs, "pay attention." Hazel turned back around and slumped in her seat. She should have followed Jack. Why did she let Mrs. Jacobs stop her? They'd traveled through the Earth's molten core, the Arctic, through space and beyond together, and she'd let a fifth-grade teacher with no imagination stop her? Maybe it was all a conspiracy. Maybe they had done something to him, poisoned him somehow. Maybe he was being held captive somewhere. Maybe he needed her to rescue him. A folded-up note landed on Hazel's lap. Her name was written on the front in boyish print. She unfolded it and beheld the words, "It's your fault." Hazel turned in her seat and glared at the boys in the back. Tyler mouthed, "Your fault." Bobby glared at her. "Crazy Hazy," he hissed. In one motion, Hazel stood up, grabbed the hard pencil case from her desk, and hurled it at Tyler. There were some yelps, some gasps, and then absolute quiet. Even Mrs. Jacobs had been shocked into stillness. The pencil case ricocheted off Tyler's face and clattered on the desk. Pencils rolled everywhere. They were the only movement in the room. Hazel stood there looking at the frozen tableau of her class, at the shocked faces of the other kids, at Tyler, who was clutching his face, at Mrs. Jacobs, who seemed to have short-circuited and decided she was not sorry, not in the least bit. She gave the room one last look, turned, and stomped out. She looked into Mr. Williams' room to see Jack's desk still empty. Mr. Williams had returned, though. Hazel couldn't believe he hadn't stopped into her classroom to give them an update. Hazel wanted to run in and ask him, but the sound of clanky footsteps from the room behind her indicated Mrs. Jacobs had regained function. So Hazel sprung off on her heel and ran down 3 flights of stairs into the girls' locker room, where a bunch of surprised-looking 4th graders were changing into their gym clothes. Hazel straightened purposefully and gave them the sort of look that 5th graders give 4th graders to keep them in line, and then walked into one of the bathroom stalls and curled up in a ball on the toilet where she sat until the end of the school day. And if anyone saw her, they would think that this was the way she was supposed to be, that this was perfectly normal to be a thing created out of the lack of something else. Finally, the school bell rang, and Hazel unballed herself from the toilet and opened the stall. Her legs groaned as if they would have liked nothing more than to be curled up like that forever. Everyone was streaming out of the school, and there was no going back for her backpack or her jacket, because she didn't need to add missing the bus to her list of crimes. Poor Hazel. And she didn't particularly want to face anyone in the class. Never again, really, but certainly not now. When you throw something at someone else, it's usually not a considered action. Hazel really had not thought things through. If Hazel had thought things through, she might have realized that elementary schools don't take kindly to students throwing things at other students, or them stomping out in the middle of class, or to completely disappearing in the middle of the day. She might have realized that these activities would result in an inevitable call to her mother, and that her mother, too, would not take kindly to the throwing, stomping, or disappearing, and that when Hazel snuck out at the back door of the building at the end of the day with her backpack, jacket, hat, or mittens, and walked around the whole school to head to the buses, her mother would inevitably be there waiting for her. Hi, Chakai. What were you thinking? Where were you? What happened? All of these words came spluttering out of her mother's mouth at once, but Hazel got the drift. I'm sorry. You're sorry? You're sorry. Do you know how worried I was? You just disappear like that? We looked everywhere for you. Hazel's heart sank. I'm sorry, she said again. Her mother shook her head and grabbed her phone. I have to call Mr. Yee, she said, to let him know you haven't been kidnapped. Principals really don't like it when 5th graders disappear in the middle of the day. As Hazel's insides churned, her mom talked on the phone to the principal. She said, a lot, and I see, and yes, that'll take care of it. Hazel got the distinct feeling that it was she. Her mom hung up and, turning to Hazel, started to put it away. Wait, can we call Jack? The words burst out of Hazel's mouth. What? This was not one of those whats that was asking, what did you say? Or could you delve deeper so I could better understand your meaning? He was hurt. Something hurt him. Something got in his eye. He was hurt really bad and they took him away and I don't know what happened because I didn't follow him and I threw a snowball. Tears pricked in Hazel's eyes. Her mother's expression softened. Oh, is that what this is about? Hazel nodded. Oh, honey, her mother sighed. I'm sorry he got hurt. I really am. That must have been really hard. But he got something in his eye? Is that really worth all this drama? Hazel's cheeks went red. It wasn't just that. She couldn't say quite what it was, though. Her mom sighed and rubbed her forehead. You're getting older now, and I think it's time to control your imagination a little bit, because it causes you to act in ways that are not always appropriate. Hi, Michael. Like throwing things at people. Hazel blushed. It wasn't like she would throw things at just anyone. You could have hurt Tyler, you know. And no matter how upset you are, that's just not okay. Do you understand? Hazel shrugged. She heard Bobby's voice in her head and wondered why it was her who was not allowed to hurt anyone. You have to live in reality sometimes, her mother continued, even when it's not fun. And reality is that you go to Lovelace now. This is a different school, and you have to behave a certain way. The reality is that sometimes people we love get hurt, and we can't just turn into the Incredible Hulk. Hazel looked at the floor. The Incredible Hulk with a batting 273 with a slugging percentage of 581. He was a disaster in the field, though, according to Jack. Her mom shook her head and exhaled. The car was quiet suddenly, and the air was scratchy and thick. "I know it's hard with your dad gone," she said finally. "It's hard for me too, and I'm trying the best I can. But," she turned to Hazel, "we need to work together. I can't do this alone. I can't come running to school because you're missing. I can't be getting emails from your teacher all the time about your behavior. Part of being grown up is acting the way that you're supposed to act, even if you don't feel like it. Can you be grown up for me?" Hazel understood. Being grown up meant doing what grown-ups wanted you to do. It meant sacrificing your imagination for rules. It meant sitting quietly at your desk, in your desk chair while your best friend is helicoptered off for emergency eye surgery. It meant letting people say whatever they wanted you to. But her mother seemed so tired and so sad, and it wasn't like Hazel to make trouble. She wanted to do well in school and make friends and have her teachers like her and have her mom be happy and proud of her. She just didn't seem to know how. "I'll try," she said quietly. "Good," said her mom. "Now, Mr. Yee told me that some things are going to happen at school. You're going to meet the counselor. We're going to go for evaluations." "Mrs. Jacobs hates me." "She doesn't hate you, Hazel. You have to see things from her perspective. She's got a big class to manage. She's just trying to do her job, honey. You never know what someone else is going through, right?" Hazel shrugged. "Everyone just wants to help you," her mother said. Hazel stared at the dashboard. Up until this year, nobody thought she needed help. "It'll be okay. You've been through a lot, that's all. And everyone needs help sometimes." She touched Hazel gently on the shoulder. "Now let's call over to Jack's and see what's going on." So Hazel's mother called up Jack's home, while Hazel leaned in to listen. It's not an easy thing to keep yourself from exploding. She could hear the drone of Jack's dad's voice from the receiver, but she couldn't make out any words. She tugged at her mom's coat and whispered, "Let me talk to Jack," once and then again. Her mom nodded. An eternity later, she said, "Oh, all right then, and I'll let her know, and thank you very much, Kevin. And then, is Jack available to talk?" And finally, she stopped talking, and as Hazel reached for the phone, she hung up. Hazel gaped at her mother. "He couldn't talk," she said, starting the car. "He was busy." "Busy? Busy doing what?" "I don't know, but he's okay. He got glass in his eye." "Glass?" Hazel imagined a shard of glass the size of a small knife sticking out of Jack's eye. "Yeah, they can't imagine how it happened. There must have been some in the snow," and her eyes traveled to Hazel and then snapped back. "But it wasn't very much, and they got it out." "But it really hurt him." "He's okay now, honey. That's what matters. It wasn't a big deal." Hazel flushed. "It looked like a big deal." I know. Can we go over there?" Her mother frowned. "I don't know. Mr. Campbell said he was busy." "He's not too busy to see me." Hazel folded her arms and slumped in her seat. "Jack was never busy. He would never not want to talk to her. They were keeping something from her. Something was wrong." Here. I'm not a great one-handed typer, you guys. Of course, her mother had to stop at the grocery store on the way home because it was completely grown up to be worried about how much cereal there was in the house instead of a boy with a glass knife in his eye. Hazel sat in the front seat while her mom spent a lifetime in the grocery store, barely resisting the urge to punch through the window. It would accomplish nothing but maybe get glass in her eye, but then at least she might know what Jack was going through. Hazel burst out of the car when they got home and ran to Jack's front door before her mother could stop her. She still didn't have her jacket. She stood on the doorstep, afraid for a moment to knock, because something was up, something was wrong, because they wouldn't let her talk to him because she'd let Jack be let off. But whatever it was, Jack needed her. Now was not the time to stand on doorsteps, heart pounding. It was time to stride through the door and see what awaited on the other side. So she rang the doorbell, twice because that was their signal. Jack's mom opened the door. "Oh," said Hazel again. "Hi." "Hello," said Mrs. Campbell, who seemed like she might fall over with the effort of it. "Where's your jacket?" Hazel blinked. "I'm fine, Mrs. Campbell." She peered into the house. "Is Jack there?" "Oh, sure," Mrs. Campbell said, smiling that half smile she had now, a smile that existed because it was lacking something. Footsteps then, a herd of them. as if Jack's accident had caused him to duplicate. And at first Hazel thought he had, because 3 boys appeared in front of her where she'd been expecting 1. Hazel stared. Jack was fine. Jack was fine. No eye patch, no shard of glass sticking out of his eye, no permanent disfigurement. Bobby and Tyler surrounded him like guards. "Oh," Hazel said. "Oh, hi, Hazel," said Bobby. Tyler glared and made a show of rubbing the spot on his head where the pencil case had hit him. Hazel ignored them. "I called you," she said to Jack, "to see how you were. Your dad said you were busy." "Bobby and Tyler were coming over," Jack said, shrugging. "I wanted to see how you were," she repeated. So the boys had come over after school to see how he was, and she, his best friend, had sat in the car at the grocery store parking lot and didn't punch through the window. "I'm sorry, but I tried calling and your dad said—" "Yeah, I was busy." "Are we going outside or what?" Bobby asked the other boys. Jack started bouncing up and down on his feet. Hazel blinked. She said, looking at Jack. "I think I figured out about the soul sucker. Someone has to have a power, just like a blocking power. And at first it seems really useless, really small when you consider all the powers in the world. But then it turns out that they're the only one who can stop this guy." Bobby snickered. Tyler snorted. And Jack ran a hand through his brown hair and shook his head. "Oh, Hazel," he said, "stop being such a baby." "Come on," said Bobby, "we gotta go." "Yeah, let's go," Jack said. "We'll go out the back." And with that, they disappeared into the house, leaving Hazel standing in the front hall alone. That's messed up. Chapter 5 is a short one, and right now it is only 11:17. Do we want to do the next chapter? It's only like 2 pages, or do you want to save it for tomorrow? Somebody let me know. What do you think, Michael? One more? Jakai says now. There are only 3 of you. Nobody else has voted. We'll do this real quick. Chapter 5, The Mirror. Now, the world is more than it seems to be. You know this, of course, because you read stories. You understand that there's the surface, and then there are all the things that glimmer and shift underneath it. And you know that not everyone believes in those things, that there are people, a great many people, who believe the world cannot be any more than what they see with their eyes. But we know better. So we're going to leave Hazel for a moment and step into the glimmering, shifting world, because there is something there you need to see. Or rather, someone. We'll call him Mal, although that's not his real name. His real name has 47 syllables, and we have things to do. Mal looks nothing like you know or can imagine, neither goblin, nor troll, nor imp, nor demon. But neither the goblins, nor trolls, nor the imps, nor even the demons know what Mal is either. For Mal is not any one of those things, but all of them. Mal is a goblin. He has green-brown skin, a frog-like mouth, and sharp little teeth. Mal is a troll. He is 7 feet tall and warty, has terrible breath, and a penchant for hanging out under bridges. Mal is an imp. He has small bat wings, a high-pitched screech of a laugh, and pointy little ears. Mal is a demon, and that means he is up to no good. But we are not interested in Mal for who he is, and we'll be leaving him soon enough. We're interested in him for what he has done. If you had encountered Mal a few days before the story began, you would have found him in very good spirits. For Mal had just invented something delightful, or at least something that he found delightful, which is altogether a different prospect. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary mirror. It was about the size of a tall man. It was oval-shaped, like something you would find covered by a white sheet in an old haunted house. It had a thick frame carved with winged beings crawling and clambering all over each other. The beings looked like angels at first. It was only when you got close enough that you could see that their faces were like skulls and their eyes were filled with menace. There was nothing ordinary about that mirror. And if you were the perceptive sort, which of course you are, you would have known it immediately. But if you weren't, you might look in the mirror and think, I didn't know that mole was so enormous, or why is my face festering, or oh my goodness, I had no idea I was so evil looking. For the mirror took beautiful things and made them ugly, and it took ugly things and made them hideous. It was the most marvelous mischief indeed. Mal took the mirror around, reflecting everything he could in it, delighting in the transformations he saw. A rose garden looked like piles of boiled spinach. A grove of trees became a charred wasteland. A sparkling lake turned into burbling oil. And then he decided he would fly up into the sky, right up to the heavens, to see the sparkling blue earth look like a mean, shriveled up thing. So Mal took the mirror and flew into the sky. He flew up, 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 and something happened. Something unexpected. Something fateful. Mal flew too high, and the mirror began to protest. The mirror creaked, and then the mirror cracked. It shattered into 100 million pieces in Mal's hands. The pieces caught the wind and landed all across the earth below. The beings of the hidden earth came out to watch, and so did the witch. She had come because of the snow. She could travel from one snowy world to another. To her, it was all the same place. She liked heavy snowfalls the best, the kind that blankets the world in white quiet, the kind where snowflakes are big enough to show their architecture, the kind that, if there is any magic to be had in the world, would make it come out. She stayed in the woods where all the hidden creatures were, and the trees feared her. She moved through the shadows and kept her eyes on the glimmering world outside. She felt the mirror shatter in the sky. She closed her eyes and saw its story spread back into the past. She fell with the tiny shards as they spread over the earth. Some fell to the ground. Some landed in trees, turning the bark black. And one landed in the eye of a boy, and she saw it as if she were right there. "Oh," said the witch, placing a long finger on her cheek. "This should be interesting." And that's where we'll pick up tomorrow. Finally, we are getting to my favorite part of the book. Not that I don't love Hazel and Jack hanging out on the playground, but I think, personally, things are an awful lot more interesting when witches are involved. If you are in my class and you are going to the Google Meet session at noon, I will put that link in Google Classroom for anybody who missed it. And I will see you to answer any of your questions about the articles for this week, anything about the paired texts that we're reading, you name it. I'll be there. You don't have to have your camera on, but you can. Or if you just want to call in on a phone, that's an option. All right. I will see the rest of you there, or I will see you tomorrow. In any case, have a great rest of your day. Stay reading. I know I'm going to be reading my book until we're talking. And I hope to see you soon.